friends, it's Mary Ellen Siegler with Massachusetts Informed Parents, and I'm joined here today by Michelle LaRowe Conover. She's spent over half of her life caring and advocating for children as an award-winning nanny, parenting author, and community volunteer, where she served as a Girl Scout leader, youth sports coach, a school council member, and an appointed and elected school committee member. From drafting a town bylaw to ban sex offenders whose previous crimes were committed against children 16 and under from such areas as schools, child care centers, and camps, to exposing the repackaged Buddhism practices offered under the guise of social emotional learning to the children in the district of which she served. Michelle is passionate about empowering parents to protect their children. So Michelle, it's so great to have you here today. Thank you for joining me and for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So what I'd like to talk to you about, and I kind of mentioned it in your introduction, is your experience with social and emotional learning. So I wanted to see if you could just explain to parents what social emotional learning is, and tell me about the meditative Buddhist practices that are being taught and employed through social and emotional learning, and why parents should be concerned.
Sure. So I think regardless of what school district you may be in, this is happening regardless of the name that is under. So there's many national names that programs that address social emotional learning are under. There's also names that are more local, things that have come from districts as grassroots efforts and community members. But if you look closely enough, you will find in most school districts today, there is this social emotional learning going on. And, you know, it's very interesting when you look at the history of the social emotional learning. You know, it really is designed, you know, in my opinion, and the research that, you know, that I'm familiar with, is to really keep kids quiet, unengaged, to sanitize their thinking, and to really cultivate a worldview that doesn't consist of independent thinkers. And depending on the programs that are employed in the districts, they can have varying backgrounds. The one that I'm most familiar with is a local program here on the Cape in Massachusetts called Karma Choice. It was a program that was introduced to our school district under the guise of social emotional learning as really a mindfulness-based stress reduction program that was later adapted to be just a mindfulness program. But there were some really core areas that stood out to me as a parent that caused great concern. And if you look around at the programs in your community, you may find these common threads in them that you'd want to be aware of. And the first one was this really repackaging of Buddhism, this a belief in cultivation of the importance of mindfulness. And the funniest thing about mindfulness is any practitioner of Buddhism will tell you that is the core essential, one of the noble, the aspects in the Buddhist noble path, one of the priorities of Buddhism is being mindful.
Right.
And funny enough, here in Massachusetts, you know, home to John Kabat-Zinn, he was really the founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction. And he had this idea to bring this mindfulness envelope to the Western culture under the guise of language that Westerners would accept. So instead of calling it Buddhism, we're going to call it mindfulness. We're going to call it paying attention. We're going to call it common sense language that will be embraced by people who don't know better. So I think, you know, the first thing to look for is the roots of the program. Where is the core beliefs, the core teachings? What are they associated with? Who are the founders? And if you see the term mindfulness or mindfulness-based stress reduction, you want to pay attention because that is associated with Buddhist practices. Firstly, for the focus on mindfulness. Secondly, for the focus on using the Buddhist metta. Surprisingly enough, in my children's school, children were actually chanting phrases out of the Buddhist Metta Sutta. So, for example, one of the phrases in the Buddhist Metta Sutta is, you know, let all beings be happy, let all creatures be happy. And this idea of loving kindness, where I can send thoughts, I can envision somebody, send thoughts to them, and they receive them by repeating these phrases over and over again, is something that was employed in the classroom. So students were being guided to think about someone, to repeat with the same kind of phrase over and over again, believing they were releasing this energy to other people. And I think that's problematic for those that don't share the Buddhist practice, to be quoting from some of their core, doctrines and in books. And the third thing that's associated with the social emotional learning under the guise of mindfulness is really the cultivation of a worldview, of a lifestyle. So this
Yeah.
is not just like, math, we're learning a lesson and we're moving on. The whole approach to this programming is to really adapt a core practice. And the core practice differs from Christianity and other religions in the sense that with this mindfulness, there is no judging of thoughts. There's no judging of feelings or emotions. You're empty in your mind. And there is no right. There is only your way. So we're really sanitizing the thought process of children. We're undermining parental authority and guidance in regards to family worldviews. And when your children are involved with these programs, they're actually undermining some of the teachings that you may be doing at home if you don't practice Buddhism and mindfulness, as a family unit or as a worldview.
Right. So it sounds like it goes really in line with postmodern thought that truth is relative, right? So there's really no right or wrong. It's just what's right for you. And we know that this really does, like you said, undermine what parents are doing with their children at home and what parents are teaching their own children. So,
and I think, one of the scariest components of that is that the people who are delivering the programming really don't have to have a background in psychology or mental health. And sometimes they're making disclosures, they're sharing information that the people who are hearing the information are not even qualified to, process or provide information on. So it really opens the door to some interesting perspectives from that sense. And also with the MBSR especially, for some children who come from a background of abuse or trauma, it can really be problematic to their mental health. So when it's delivered as a one-size-fits-all approach under the social emotional learning guise, it could be problematic for specific children.
Sure. And I was thinking that as you were describing the program that, wow, it seems like teachers are being put in the place of having to be psychotherapists or psychologists. And that's, I also just started thinking, this is so outside of what schools should be doing. Schools should be teaching reading, writing, and math, and not these types of programs. So really concerning for sure. So what happened, real quick, if you can explain what happened when you brought your concerns about this program to the school officials?
So, it all started with a simple question, and it was, let me see the curriculum. I'm curious. I want to know what is this Karma Choice? I'd like to know a little more. And the curriculum couldn't be presented. There really was no curriculum. And, as a parent, I know my right in public schools is to be able to examine the curriculum. So, that obviously raised a huge red flag. And after months of tugging to get the curriculum, what I finally got was horrifying. It was frightening. And I put my research together based on the curriculum and based on the research of what we know about mindfulness and MBSR. And I brought my concerns to the superintendent, who initially agreed to remove it from the school district after reviewing the data and the research that I had presented. I have a background in chemistry, so I do understand how to research. So it's not just like, I kind of went about this in a roundabout way. I mean, I was trained in sciences. I know how to present information and research and etc. And I presented, a binder probably 3 inches thick of concerns and references and footnotes and all that good stuff. And she seemed genuinely concerned, and I was hopeful that the commitment she made would come to pass. Unfortunately, it didn't. And I had to, get some help. I had to get the help of a lawyer. I had to get the help of a religious scholars expert, and I had to really, fight to make my voice heard in terms of my concerns that weren't just for my family, but with a family of the children of the district that I had served in as a school committee member. So it got really, interesting along the way. The end result, after a long story, was that parents now are aware of the program. They are sent a letter and they are provided with the opportunity to opt out.
That's
which
great.
never happened before. The families didn't even know the program existed.
Wow.
So, it wasn't a huge win, but it was some win in
Still a
terms of
win.
still a win,
Yeah, yeah,
having
still a
families
win.
aware of it and having the option to not participate, which my families and other families in the district take that out option up on.
That's excellent. Well, that was some really good and thorough work that you did. So kudos to you. So what can parents do to protect their children from social emotional learning in their own school districts? What would you recommend to them
Sure.
how to go about it?
I think there's 3 actionable steps that parents can take that can hugely impact their children's safety in terms of social emotional learning. The first step is that they really have to be aware of their rights. They have to be aware that it's okay to look at the curriculum, to ask what their kids are being taught. They have to be empowered to take responsibility for the education of their children in a sense that they can ask for, review, and make a decision off the curriculum that's being taught with regards to social emotional learning aligns with their family culture, worldview, and beliefs. So I think that's the first thing that I would encourage them to be sure that they know their rights and that they're empowered to exercise those rights by asking to look at the curriculum. I think the second thing that parents can do, probably one of the most helpful and practical things, is to educate your children. You have to teach before they're taught. You have to pre-teach some of these things. You have to talk about what social emotional learning is, what kind of phrases concern you, why you're concerned, and give your children practical strategies to deal with situations that they may encounter in the school. So for example, what do you do if something doesn't make you comfortable? My children have specific action steps that they know to take if they're presented with content that crosses their conscience, that they know that's not something that they're approved to be educated on. And I've really empowered them to be responsible for their education as well at an age appropriate level, of course. And the third thing, I think, and the most important thing I think parents can do is to get involved. And I'm not talking about the PTO. The PTO is wonderful, but I'm talking about the school councils and the school committees, the legislative bodies that are mandated to have an impact on the education in your community.
Yes.
It's so funny, it's so many communities have a struggle finding people to run for school committee seats, finding volunteers to fill the slots for the school councils for the schools. With 2 or 3 parents, like-minded parents, you can make a huge difference.
That is so
there was,
true. That is
there
so
was
true.
one point that I was the only parent that was going to be on the next grades, and
Right.
the volunteers. So really,
Who
get a
better to
friend and
serve
go
on
at
the
it.
who better to serve on these school committees than a parent?
And it's
So
so important, and I would just encourage you to get involved, go to the meetings, watch the meetings,
yes.
go to public comment, share your concerns, because if you don't know what's going on, you can't really have a voice in addressing it. And don't be afraid. I think that's another thing too.
Yeah, it's really true. Even a small group of parents can accomplish a lot. And so
One
sometimes
parent can accomplish a lot.
it's really, really true. So, and you are a great example of that, of course. So we really appreciate you sharing your story with us. And parents, I just would like you really pay attention to the language being used around lessons that are being taught to your children in school. So just like with CSE, you'll hear things like healthy relationships or medically accurate. And we know that there are other things that are objectionable, that are hiding behind these words, that are very unsuspecting, and the same is true with social emotional learning. So keep an eye out for words like mindfulness, like Michelle explained to us, and really just pay attention to what's happening. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at massinformedparents@gmail.com. That's massinformedparents@gmail.com. And please join Massachusetts Informed Parents on Facebook, and also visit our YouTube channel for updated videos and information, and be equipped to protect your kids. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes.